Chapter 25. Doreen was gobsmacked. How is that possible? Why isn't Betty's last name Lansdowne? Nan shook her head. I don't believe Betty's mother and father ever married, or if they did, it was so belated that everyone had the name Betty Miles so stuck in their head that they just continued to call her that. You know what? I remember there was some question as to paternity. I think she ended up not listing a father on the birth certificate. Her and Stephen broke up and made up, then broke up again a dozen times. She might have figured he shouldn't be listed on the paperwork. He's in jail now. She paused and frowned. Or he was. I don't know if he still is. Doreen asked, Do you have a piece of paper so I can write some of this down? Nan got up and came back with a small notebook and a pen. I really like this hobby of yours, she said in a conspirator's tone. It's very exciting. I don't think Mac agrees with you, Doreen said with a sideways look. She tried to write down the information in as straightforward a manner as possible. So Betty Miles's father owned a jewelry store and is the brother to Brian Lansdowne, who was the gardener handyman with the attitude that scared you, correct? Nan nodded. Doreen wrote down the rest of the family relations, the best that she could. It's an assumption that Hannah Thoreau's father was having a relationship with Betty, even though Betty was only 16, correct? That's what the rumors were back then, Nan said easily. But you know what rumors are like. Only half are true. It would explain why Lansdowne was blackmailing Hannah's father. What was his name? Glenn. Glenn and Rosie. But Glenn died some years back. Doreen wrote down those names. So they were trying to keep that a secret. And were probably paying the blackmailer in jewels in order to keep his silence. That would make sense. Then Glenn and Rosie would file a claim for the loss of the jewelry, supposedly a result of a break-in, Doreen said, working her way through this. They probably got insurance money for the jewelry, so nobody was out anything. Nan stared at her in surprise. Wow. I never considered that. So why did Betty have any of the jewelry? Why was she considered the one stealing the jewelry? That's easy, Nan said. She must have found out Lansdowne was blackmailing Hannah's father. And so she was getting jewelry in exchange for what? Her silence. She was blackmailing the blackmailer? Or in payment to keep seeing Glenn? Or for that matter, maybe Glenn gave Betty the jewelry as a gift. And Betty's father, the jewelry store owner, was probably taking a bunch of those jewels to fence them for Brian, his brother, the landscaping blackmailer. Or selling them outright in his own store. Stephen went to jail for theft. Nan sat back. That's how that happened. She pursed her lips together, staring off in the distance. He was caught with some of the jewelry missing from Glenn Thoreau's place. Betty's father didn't have any way to prove he didn't steal them. And he couldn't very well tell the cops that he was blackmailing Glenn and that the jewels were blackmail payments to Lansdowne and his blackmail partner, Betty's father. Nan stared at her granddaughter. So it all comes full circle. The two blackmailers were brothers. One went to jail. The other one got away scot-free, and Glenn Thoreau got the insurance money. One Lansdowne got caught. The other Lansdowne got dead, although years later, Doreen reminded Nan quietly. So, who do we know in all this who would have taken out Betty? They looked at each other in silence for a second. Lansdowne, they said together. If Betty wanted to stay with Glenn, or even if Betty saw her own payday coming out of her father and her uncle's blackmailing scheme, they had to buy Betty's silence to stop her from going to the cops, Doreen said. The two brothers had a good thing going. Nan clapped her hands in excitement. This is wonderful. This is supposition, Doreen said. It won't stand up in court. What court? Nan asked. Lansdowne is dead. Betty's dead. Her father, Stephen, is already in jail. And Glenn is dead. But somebody was most likely working with Lansdowne. Are you assuming it was his brother? Quite possibly. And then maybe his daughter Betty got in the way. You think Hannah knew? It's possible, Nan said. She was friends with Betty. Maybe Betty warned Hannah about the scam. And maybe Hannah knew of her father's involvement with Betty and the insurance payout. It seems like everyone got something out of the deal, except Betty. But we don't know who killed Betty, Doreen said. And that's the important thing right here. I don't care about the insurance scam, the blackmail, the jewels. Somebody killed Betty, and that's what I want to find out, to put them behind bars. You have to admit, my dear, Nan said, there is a good chance he's dead or already behind bars. Doreen didn't want to say anything, but one person was a little too riled over this whole thing to not have known, or to not have played a larger part than had first been suspected. Doreen quietly put the notebook into her pocket. I'll do a little more digging. If I find out the truth, I'll let you know. Nan leaned forward. Are you sure you don't want to talk to somebody here, like maybe Gladys? Questions might get answered. Doreen shook her head. No, because I don't want to upset anybody else or to alert anybody else. If I'm wrong, that would cause more hurt or problems for everyone. Nan patted Doreen's hand. You're a good girl. Doreen wasn't so sure about that. She had a pretty darn good idea who had killed Betty. But it would upset a whole lot of people all over again. And that wouldn't do Doreen's reputation or her presence in the town any good at all. She looked at the rest of the tuna casserole. Still quite a bit remained. Are you going to eat that tomorrow? She asked Nan. Nan chuckled and stood. Nope. You are. I'll wrap it up and send it home with you. The only thing is, I need the dish back. Doreen chuckled. No problem. I can do that. She stood as Nan returned with the wrapped tuna casserole. Nan, don't tell anyone about our conversation, okay? Let's keep this a secret until I get to the bottom of this. Nan leaned over and kissed Doreen on the cheek. Absolutely. My lips are sealed. But Doreen knew Nan had already told half the world. Probably while wrapping up the tuna casserole.